Good Saturday morning to everybody, and welcome to Legal Notes with attorneys Ned Barron and Mary Ann Charron. I am Gary Byron. This morning, we're going to talk about how to identify when your elderly parent needs support. And listen, most people want to stay in their home, right? They don't want to leave, but do they need help? And really, if they do, when do they need the help? So let's do this. I want to have you both weigh in on this. What are some of the warning signs that if you've got a friend, a relative, a parent, it's got to be tough when it's a parent, displays some of these warning signs? What should people be on the lookout for?
Well, one of the things I just wanted to back up a second and just explain why this topic is.
Yeah, please
we're talking
do.
about this today is that as attorneys, that we oftentimes are brought into the situation after this has already happened, after it's too late.
Yep.
And one of the purposes for us discussing this today is to really help people out with, we're going to begin with, what are the warning signs? What to look for? Because if you can catch a parent whose capacity has diminished, and I'm not saying that they have no capacity, I'm just saying that their capacity is beginning to be diminished, what are the signs to look out for? And then we'll get into, probably in the next show, we'll talk about how to support them in the home and all that. But today we really want to focus on what are the warning signs and
it's a really tough topic because we are children and we have a perception of our parents because that they know and have taken care of us. And so we've got this interesting parent-child dynamic. And so now I think a lot of us still think of our parents in that way, right? We have every story, we come home for Christmas and we all become children again, right?
Of course, yeah.
So we all take on those roles that we had as kids and the parents are still parents. And so now what this requires is the child to parent and the parent to become the child. And it's a really difficult thing to look at it that way. And it's a difficult thing to give up your own independence and acknowledge it. And it doesn't make for easy conversations. And so given that dynamic, Ned and I really thought, let's talk about what the warning signs are. And as we talk about them, it could become, it's kind of, sometimes it's obvious, right? You like some of the things that we're going to talk about. For example, are they current on their bills? Right? I mean, just as an example, it's like, well, if they're not, then we know there's an issue. What's the issue? Some people think, but maybe when you come to visit, you don't necessarily visit. You visit them and you're not looking at the stack of bills that's on the table because you think, oh, or the cable's out. Right. I don't have the TV anymore.
Or the power was shut off.
But those are obvious. I'm talking about the less obvious things, like when was the last time you paid the electric bill? Or if they're just a few months behind, or, maybe there's a mortgage or we don't know, but you don't always necessarily know when you come to visit, right? Or you meet them at a restaurant, so you're meeting at Denny's for breakfast. I'm just saying, as an example, you're not going to know what's really going on. So, are the bills current? That's an easy one for you to, as a warning sign, but not necessarily the easiest thing to find out unless you look at their bills, unless you're the one helping them to pay those bills online, right? So most older people are not that savvy with the computer to have their payments be on auto pay. So they still write checks and they still put them in the mail. They still go to the post office to get stamps. And so it's not the easiest thing all the time, but that is one I would say that is pretty important. Are the bills being paid?
Right. I also think that to kind of back up a little bit too is that more immediately, like if we are out to breakfast with them or if we're at a family function at someone else's house, those subjects aren't going to be coming up. So we should be looking for other signs such as personal hygiene.
Yep.
Oh. That, do they look, and I hate to say smell, like they're bathing regularly? Are they getting their hair cut? Is the hair clean and all that? Those are the clothing that they're wearing, is it clean also? Those are signs that, wait a minute, something...
Brushing their teeth.
Right.
If their hair's all messed up.
That's a big one.
Especially if there was a change from someone who was very meticulous in their appearance, and now they're not. That is a really big warning sign, especially if it's something that you don't see once.
We all have favorite clothes that we wear on weekends, right?
Oh, sure.
So there's a difference between the favorite clothes and having somebody, because the elderly, they don't tend to change. So they will go to sleep in their clothing. They won't necessarily put pajamas on and put,
Well,
so.
not all of them. You're saying the ones that might be impaired.
Oh, that's true, Ned. Yes.
Want to clarify that for our listeners?
Oh my gosh. But yeah, so I mean, those are so it's like, are they continually wearing the exact same things? And breath, the smell of breath, I think is a really important one.
The smell of the same clothes, and yeah.
Yeah.
You know what really make me nervous is like leaving the oven on or leaving the gas stove on a little bit. Even if it's on just a little bit.
It's nerve-wracking.
Well, yeah.
So what we've seen happen is for people who are in that, I'll call it that in-between stage, if they know that they're starting to forget, they won't even use the oven anymore. Right? That's what we are seeing. And so they're not cooking. So if they're competent enough to know that they have forgotten before, then they're nervous enough and they have enough wherewithal to say, oh my God, I can't let this happen. I can't let the house burn down. So therefore, I'm not cooking anymore. And we're finding that eating habits is a real issue. And, when you don't eat and you don't have the sustenance and the energy, it completely can change the person who you were into someone who you are becoming. That's, not healthy. For example, I mean, Ned you have a personal story related to that I think is, oops.
I do?
Yeah.
I'm sure. I'm not sure which one you're specifically talking about, but I want to touch on what you're saying.
Yeah.
Is that when it comes to dementia, a number of years ago, I went to this fantastic seminar, and it was given by a neurologist who specialized in elderly people from Mass General. And he was explaining what dementia was, or an elderly diminished capacity, and what were caused by, and what the three major causes were, of what we under the overall blanket or umbrella of dementia was that they're the ones that we hear about all the time, such as Alzheimer's. Right, that's probably the one.
It's a form of dementia.
Right, it is a form of dementia, but it's the one we hear about the most. But there's another big one, which is vascular dementia, which is, and I'm not a doctor, so I'm just giving a layman's explanation from my understanding. But that is that, vascular meaning our arteries and all that if we have a diminished blood flow, then that means there's diminished blood flow to the brain, and therefore that slows down capacity and that.
But isn't that more operable? Can't they just widen the arteries?
Sometimes, for example,
I know you're not a doctor, but
right. One of the ones that I hear about is like the carotid artery. Right, that's one of our main arteries.
Yes.
And if that is discovered to be blocked, then they can go in and operate and clean that out. But you can't get at everything. Right, there are arteries there and capillaries in the brain that you can't get to, right? Or typically, I don't think you can. But I'm just giving you an overall example. That's another example. But another one is nutrition deficiencies.
Yeah.
And this is
one
of the things that Marianne was referring to.
Yeah.
Is that just poor eating can also lead to dementia, or at least the symptoms of dementia. And that is one of the ones that is the most easily corrected.
Correct. That's right.
That if you had someone who was not eating well, that you can help get them some help, get them some good food and a proper diet, and that can alleviate some of those symptoms. So, along with that, so one of the signs that we look for also when it comes to cooking and all that was, well, what's the refrigerator look like?
Oh, yeah. That's I have had to go into refrigerators, and there is food. So that's talking about nutrition, right? And so as children, we make sure that, Dad, are you eating okay? Right? And so we pack something up and we give it to them to heat up. We give them leftovers. We make sure. So Thanksgiving, who gets all the leftovers? Dad, you can have the leftovers. And we wrap it up and we put it in a nice package. And you go visit around Easter time and the Thanksgiving leftovers are still in the fridge. And so, or you don't think to look in the fridge. You know, as part of the work that we have to do, because we do guardianship and conservator work, and we do have to go in and make these assessments and see what's going on to see if, for example, if someone can continue to live independently, we always go in the fridge. And so I look for two things: what's in the freezer and what's still there. Is there stuff that good intentioned family members and friends have put in there and that the person has never opened? In other words, moldy food, fruit that's gone. I mean, both of us have seen disgusting refrigerators. And then sometimes you also see people who have packaged things. So you make a lasagna and you put it into like little serving portions for your dad or mom, but you know, and then they're in the freezer and it's like, Dad, just take this out, thaw it up, and then you can heat it up. And if that stuff is still there, then you know they're not eating the food. So what are they eating? Are they just eating, you know, chocolate-covered donuts at Dunkin' Donuts when they get that cup of coffee if they're still going out? Are they just eating a few crackers? Are they forgetting to eat? Are they not eating? You know, that's...
Wouldn't you notice a difference in weight gain or weight loss? Is some of it visual?
Sometimes, but, you know, you might say, Dad, you lost a few pounds. And he's like, yeah, I've been trying to slim down, right? So, I mean, until it gets too bad. So, in other words, when they're too thin, and if it's Saturday morning and you're having breakfast at, again, I don't even know if Denny's still exists, but if you're having breakfast with your parent, you think so?
Yeah, I think so.
And they're wearing their sweats, you may not even notice.
You know, it just occurred to me, what about, especially we're talking about a certain age, what about medication? Imagine not taking medication that you need to take daily.
Yeah. Or taking too much because you forget.
Well, right.
It's like,
I don't know. Did I take that? I better play it safe and just take it, you know? And that could happen 2 or 3 times a day.
Absolutely.
Oh,
100%.
boy.
Yeah, that's another sign that we tell our clients to look out for is, are the medications being taken in the prescribed doses, in the prescribed times, and all that, which is also kind of a tough one. It's kind of like the bills. How are you going to know unless you're really digging, right? Really asking them, really looking into it. You have to know when this prescription was filled, and then you could actually go and count.
Right, how many pills?
Right, how many pills are there? You know, and one of the ways to start supporting a parent with that are the pill boxes, right? That have money, you can help them. But that is, again, goes back to, oftentimes people are resistant to that assistance. I'm okay. I don't need you to help me.
Right.
And that's problematic, especially when you're a child and you're used to listening to your parent. You're used to obeying.
Yes. When they say no, you know what that means, right?
Right.
See, these are really interesting warning signs. How about hoarding?
Yeah. It's a big one.
That is really tough.
I wrote a hoarding bill when I was in the legislature.
Interesting. Yeah.
As the ranking member of the aging committee, and it passed. So what I've written about 4 laws that are in Connecticut statutes that are law, and that I wrote, and that was one of them. It had to do with hoarding. I mean, I don't want to take up your time.
No, it's okay. It's just that what happens is they don't tend to throw things out. They're not going out to their garbage on a regular basis. They might forget that they purchased something, and so they continue to purchase it. So they may be perseverating over a particular purchase, and they continue to purchase things. I mean, both Ned and I have gone into houses, and I can probably tell you that they're such fire hazards. I mean, I've seen stacks of newspapers for like 10 years or, things like that, magazines. One very, very sad situation, I found the dead dog under the newspapers.
Oh my goodness! So must have reeked.
You know what? By the time I was involved, it was just a skeleton. I mean, it was really It was really awful. But I'm just seeing, this is, Ned and I are trying to talk about warning signs. The circumstance that I had was clearly the person was past the warning signs, right?
Right.
So, but they do start to accumulate things. And so the dining room table that used to be for family functions is now the place where the mail and the newspapers and the junk mail and other things, grocery bags for, the last several weeks have kind of been stacked up and things like that. And then you no longer have a table that's usable. And then when that's not usable, the kitchen table gets used. And when that's not usable, the coffee table in the living room, right? I mean, you see these type of things all the time. So hoarding is an issue. Well, you're laughing.
I was going to say, you've been in my house?
Single man?
Well, okay.
Oh my God. Ned, how many of these
The bachelor pad? Is that what it is?
What he's saying is that I need to watch out for these warning signs for him. That's what's going on. I'm going to have to go check out his house.
I want to qualify what Marianne is saying is that this is not typical, right? These are extreme cases. But I think that one of the warning signs also to look out for is that if you do go into their house, is it clean, right?
Yeah.
Has it been vacuumed? Is the bathroom clean? Are things in working order? I was involved in a hoarding house a bunch of years ago, and Marianne's already described what it can look like, but the one of the crazy things was going into the bathroom.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
There was one bathroom in this house, and
was there a working toilet?
There was no working toilet.
Yeah.
The shower was full of garbage in the tub, so that wasn't working, and the sink was full of stuff.
Yeah.
And so
I've seen that too.
The question was, well, where are they going to the bathroom and where are they bathing? Now, again, this is very extreme, right? This is not typical, and
although both of us have seen this,
I think I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, but this is why we're talking about warning signs, because perhaps with these people that maybe there could have been an intervention.
Yes.
Right. When the sign started happening, that there could have been an intervention, and then this could have all been avoided.
Some warning signs, as I'm listening to you, are more obvious than others. A lot of people maintain a fairly routine contact with their parents.
True.
And whether it's phone calls or we get together every Sunday for brunch or whatnot, mothers and daughters and
right.
and maybe fathers and sons go out and watch the Sunday game or something like that together or whatever. My point is, excuse me, when you don't get that phone call that you are expecting, and it happens once, hey, we can all be forgetful from time to time without reading too much into it. Oh my goodness, I had a busy. My plate was just so busy today.
Right.
But when it happens second time, third time, fourth time, and it starts to be consecutive, and now it's more the rule rather than the exception, is that a sign? Oh, I thought didn't we talk? Or, I forgot, If you get that routinely, that's got to be a sign as well.
Yeah, and so sometimes they lost their phone, right? So you give them their cell phone, you give them a cell phone, and they don't know where they put it.
Well, that's me half the time.
The list is important.
My keys, I don't know where my keys are. I don't know where my phone is.
So you can have that, and you're right. It is, and you can explain it away only so long, right? So often, because you say, I was outside, I was talking to my neighbor, or, whatever the explanation is. And certainly, but that requires the child, all right, to move past the existing parent-child dynamic and really take on the role of the parent and go see what's going on. And sometimes those children are too far away and they don't necessarily have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
Well, it also brings up other people in their lives also. So friends that you mentioned, you're really talking about habits. And what if the habit was every Wednesday, a group of men or a group of women go out to lunch together, and one of their friends now is coming up with excuses why they can't do it. That's something that if you see a change in your friend's habits, that elderly friend who was regularly getting together with this group of people and now is not doing that. That's a warning sign. And we have had family members who have come to us to say, there's something going on with my mother or father. I found this out because their friends called me to say, hey, I just want you to know that, your mom or dad isn't doing what they used to. They keep kind of blowing us off, so to speak. And that's a warning sign. And I think a lot of times where that comes from is that it's oftentimes that when people are starting to slip, they know that they're starting to slip.
Yes.
And it's coming out in conversation, and then they either become very good at covering, where they're covering. Like, you could have a conversation. We've had conversations with clients or potential clients, and it's not until you're half an hour into the conversation where you say, wow, okay, now I know there's an issue here. But for that half an hour, they really held it together. So it's a really tricky.
It's one thing when they start to recognize it themselves. It's another thing when they decide to take that first step, and that's got to be very difficult. Folks, you're listening to Legal Notes with Mary Ann Charron and Ned Barron from Charter Oak Law Group. I'm Gary Byron. All right, so you recognize some of these signs. Maybe they begin in the early stages as very subtle, and they progressively get worse. What do you do? Where do we go? What do we do?
Well, okay, first of all, you really need to do some, I'll call it due diligence, to use a legal term. You really need to try to understand what's going on with your parent or your family member.
Okay.
And so you got to get to the house, right? You got to see what's going on. You got to open that refrigerator.
And spend more time with them.
You just have to. And, what Ned and I have found is that sometimes they're not going to let you in the house. They don't want you to see. They're fine with just the little conversations, you checking in on them. And that might mean you reaching out to their friends, people who or have the neighbor check in on them, right? So, but you got to do something. I mean, I suppose you could do something drastic and call protective services, but I mean, let's hope that there's something you need to see with your own eyes and ears what's going on, and you have to, because maybe it's just, as Ned was saying, a nutrition thing, and we have to start to support them nutritionally, which is a really easy answer. Maybe they aren't taking their medication, and all you have to do is just make sure that they're taking their medication regularly, right? So that's the first thing. You have to go in and you have to look. You have to see what's going on.
It is the first and the hardest because, again, there's that parent-child relationship, that dynamic, and you are going to have to change that in a lot of cases. And that's so tough. But we've both have had plenty of clients who are children or their parents just saying, I just can't do that, because they think they're trying to make their parent do something, and that's not the case. They're just trying to support them. And when a third party is brought in, oftentimes, Mary Ann mentioned Adult Protective Services, which is a department within the Department of Social Services. And what they can do is they can go out. They can do a wellness check. If you call them and the Department of Social Services, Adult Protective Services, and you have them open up a case, it's anonymous. They don't have. They will not tell the person who it was that called, but they'll go in and they'll do a wellness check. They'll do the things.
But what if the person's not cooperative and they say, "I don't need to let you in"?
Well, then there's a report, right? So at least Protective Services goes in, and most of the time we still have a generation of, I'll say, elderly people who do respect authority. And most of the time they will at least let them in the front door. You know what I mean? Sometimes they don't, but you can kind of tell. I mean, just open the door and you get a peek and see what's going on.
I only ask because somebody that's listening to this, if their parents live out of state, and they're like, "Oh man, I can't be down there every week checking in." You can contact a neighbor if you have their contact information, but I guess you could also contact social services.
Which we kind of, I feel that's a last resort.
Right.
Because it is the most, because now
it's invasive.
Then they're in the system, kind of. I mean, it's not in the system in the same sense of Child Protective Services.
Okay.
Let's say.
Right.
But it's still, once they go out there and if they feel that the person is being uncooperative, that there is an issue, but they're being uncooperative, it can get escalated. I have had experience with elderly people with adult protective services, and just to let you know, the maximum that they can do is they could go to the probate court and get a conservator.
They would file an application for a conservatorship,
right? If
they felt the person was at risk,
right?
Yep.
But hopefully, they're going to try and take less extreme interventions measures prior to that. But that is the extreme. That is the okay. And when I say extreme, I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean it's the greatest amount of intervention. Right. And we want to even in the whole conservatorship program, so to speak, that it is still supposed to be least restrictive means, that you're supposed to give the person who is under conservatorship the most
independent
and respect.
Right.
Yep, absolutely.
Sure.
So,
do it and kind of discreetly if you can't. It's hard to, but you try.
I mean, you could ask them to say, when was the last time you went to the doctor? You know what? Let's just go. I mean, the truth is, most people want help. Most parents want their children to be involved in their lives. Most parents, want that.
If you fall into this category, whether it's you who's starting to notice the onset yourself, or if you are the child or loved one, and you're noticing this, there are steps that you can take. I would begin by contacting Charter Oak Law Group. They're located in Bloomfield, Danbury, and Norfolk. Call them, 860-570-1229. Again, 860-570-1229. You can also check out their website, www.charteroaklaw.com. In fact, I tell people always start with the website. It may answer some of your questions, or better yet, spark some others for when you call them. You can ask all your questions at once. Again, it's charteroaklaw.com. And if you've got a question that you'd like to have emailed, maybe we can get it asked on this show. It's legalnotes@charteroaklaw.com. For Mary Ann Charron and Ned Barron, I'm Gary Byron. Thank you so much for listening. Until next Saturday, have a good one, everybody. So long.